Well, blinking botherations. In a previous video I mentioned about making my own wiring harness, and one of the reasons that I often do that rather than buying the one off the shelf is because you have components on that don't appear on the original wiring diagram. For example, this has got a Payson electronic ignition which goes straight down to the contact breakers or the electronic unit here and the wiring is slightly different. Also, with this having a single coil rather than a twin coil, and also the power box, this one under here, which acts as the rectifier, has a different wiring circuit. I made my own wiring harness up, but of course I've done it wrong, and I'm kicking myself because it's not the first time I've made this mistake. You should always get everything in place, check the wiring before you put the binding on, and I've put the binding on of course and it's wrong. So fortunately, with the type of material I've used there, it's it amalgamates to itself. It's very easy just to unwind and redo, and for some reason after I've been going through it ready to wire it and put all the connectors on, I've realised that somehow I've ended up with two sets of cabling for the stop light and the rear tail light, and the reason for that is because of the colour changes on the diagram from NU, which is brown blue, which is confusing in itself, to a straight brown, and I've run a brown which was going to go back up to the battery, and I've also run a brown blue back up to the battery. So that's one set of cables and that's another set. So I'm going to strip all the outer off, wire it all up, and then before I actually bind it again, the harness, I'm going to make sure all the connections are actually connected, and I'll probably fit all the bullet connectors and spade terminals, whatever's needed. Possibly not in the headlight shell. In the headlight shell, quite a lot of these cablings here go straight to the ammeter and the ignition switch, which is quite a complicated wire, and these actually get stripped and then poked straight into the end of the unit. I'm going to actually make a little alteration there and have them on bullet connectors, so if I've got one wire that appears to be not working properly or the functionality is not there, it's just a case of undoing the bullet connectors rather than having to dismantle or take out the whole ignition switch. Well, I've got my multimeter just set to continuity because I'm really confused about what I've done in the past, and that's a problem of not actually doing it in one go, but I think I've sorted it now. So just here I've got my tail light and my brake light switches. So like a good little boy, I'm actually going to tape them up and label them, which I should have done the first time because I've run the brown wire back round through that harness back down to the stoplight switch, which is what confused the situation. So I'm just going to put a bit of masking tape on there. Wash that off. Right, so put that on there. So that is stop and tail light. So that brown one there goes all the way back up through the harness, back down into here, and then that brown one goes to one side of the stop and tail lights, the stop light switch, and then the brown and blue comes back up and goes to the battery. The other brown and blue goes back up to the ammeter, which is where it should. That's why I was getting confused, because they only had one, but actually if you check on the diagram down here, this battery's got two brown and blues. Now when I say brown and blue, that's the other problem I've got, is I can't get any brown with a blue stripe, so it's actually blue with a brown stripe. So I'm going to make a note on my master diagram that those wiring colours are the other way around. So that now all seems to work. So the other mistake I made was this green and brown wire, which I needed to be continuity going from the light at the back all the way through the harness up to the switch. For some reason I put a cut in it, I don't know why, but that needs now joining together and then re-wrapping within that harness there. So touch wood, that is all working fine now. and we'll sort that out with continuity later. So the next thing to do is just to wrap these. I'm just using this rubber grommet to protect the cabling from the sharp edges on these holes here. I'm only going to be using this back one anyway. I'll just fiddle that up into place. So I'm going to be wiring up my combined ignition and headlight switch today, and I guess for some people the wiring diagrams can be a little bit intimidating, but if you just take every single circuit as a single unit, then it's not that intimidating. So we have here this switch. Now the numbers from 1 to 11 are on this side of the unit, and then the rest of the numbers are on this side of the unit, which can appear a little bit confusing, but it's just a case of following the wiring through. For example, the first thing I'm going to do is run a red with black wire from number 1 on this switch all the way up to a parking bulb. I don't know what type of parking bulb unit I'm going to be using yet in the headlight shell, so I shall just run that as a piece of wire with a loose end for now, and then decide what type of parking bulb fits in and how that's set up. In fact, what I'll probably do is run a red with black up to here and put a connector in there. As I said before, I want this lighting switch and circuit switch to be independently removable. So yeah, I'll run up a bullet onto a red one here, and then again, if I need to take that out, I can just undo the bullet up to the parking bulb. That's not exactly accurate, but that's just the way I prefer to do it. So I shall crack on with that. On the diagram, number 2 goes round and links to number 4 with a link wire, and number 2 also goes up to the one side of the ammeter. Oops, I said in the previous bit there that 2 goes round to 4. It doesn't, it goes round to 10. 2 goes to 10 and 10 goes to 12, and that's one of these that goes from the back of the unit to the front. Doesn't really matter that you can't see that, because you'd see it if you had one of your own, but yeah, 10 goes to 12 on that one. With this switch, I actually bought it as a used unit and noticed that quite a few of the link wires had already been done in black. Where have they gone? Over here. So I'm going to continue with that. Now this was actually wrong when I checked them. Some of these link wires that are suggested on the Norton diagram weren't in the correct place, so I'm glad I took those out, and I'm going to redo them so that all those link wires are correctly sorted. So that's my next job. So before you put any of these connectors on that are not screwed, i.e. the bullet connectors, these type of things, it's really advisable to tin the wire. And this is not really intended as a video on how to solder. Yes, it's got an L in it, folks. I don't know why the Americans call it solder, but anyway, it's solder. You need a clean iron, hence the sponge. Put a little bit of solder onto the iron just to get that continuity or connectivity, or so it thermally goes through to the wire, and then just place your solder on there, and the heat will follow, or rather the solder will follow the heat, and then once that's done, you're ready to put the bullet on. Again, with the bullet, I am a bit naughty the way I do it. What I do is tend to put the bullet onto the end of the iron. I'll show you, I might as well while I'm on. I put that onto there, and that really heats that up well. It just happens to be the right shape for this iron. In that goes, melts until you see it bubbling out the end. Whack that in, and then that falls into place and is absolutely solid. It's got a beautiful little soldered end as well. Okay, that's how I do it, and that'll be absolutely solid. Here's a simple tip if you're running out of hands and you just need to hold something with your pair of pliers and you want to free up your pliers, I just stick a rubber band around it, and that means that it's always holding it. Ta-da! Simple, but there you go. You don't have to hold it. Hang it off the bench if you want to do it. Just a simple tip, thought you might be interested. So there we are, there's the completed unit with all the wires on. I just think it's easier to do it this way and connect in the headlight shell than have to try and fiddle all these wires into these holes. It's much easier to do it on the bench, I think. And so that's it. The only other thing I've left here is this one, which goes up to the ammeter. That'll go onto there on the back of that. And this one is, I've left that because that goes up to a bulb holder on the headlight shell, and I'm not sure what connection that has. It might be a straight soldered one, I don't know, but I'll check that. I'm not ready, but anyway, that switch is ready to install into the headlight now. But before I do that, I'm going to do all the rest of the bullet connectors and the wiring on the rest of the bike, and then I can test everything. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time.